Welcome back. We're looking very closely at the forthcoming visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to the United States. The Prime Minister has been in France. He's now on his way to America. I'm now joined by Amitabh Ghosh. Thanks very much, Mr. Ghosh, for being with us. The issue of climate change is a real crisis. It's a crisis around the world. When we look at the Trump administration and the fact that President Trump has pulled out of the Paris talks, the Paris Agreement, where does that leave us? As we look at climate as a fundamental issue impacting all nations?
We're in a very bad situation today. Vishnu, there's nothing else that one can say about it. It's perfectly clear now that President Trump and the Republicans are going to pull out of every kind of climate mitigation treaty, every kind of climate mitigation effort, even as things get worse and worse. I don't think the situation has ever been this bad, really. Because, the idea used to be before that when we have all these great disasters, people will wake up and begin to do something about climate change issues. But we see exactly the opposite being the case. You saw these recent wildfires in Los Angeles.
Yes.
There was a clear climate fingerprint there, because of the desiccation of the soil and the extraordinarily high temperatures, the very, very long drought, etc. But very quickly after the fires started, the whole conversation shifted not towards climate change, but really towards blaming diversity, equity, inclusion efforts, etc. So it's difficult to think at this moment that the world is going to make any progress on these issues.
So, Mr. Ghosh, my question is that US and India did launch several initiatives with regards to mitigating climate change. As Prime Minister Modi arrives in Washington, D.C., do you think there can be some meeting grounds, particularly with regards to India's transition to low-carbon economy?
Well, let me say, first of all, that the transition to a low-carbon economy hasn't really been happening very much. As far as I can see, we are more and more dependent on coal. More and more parts of the country are being opened up to coal mines. We've seen this happening, for example, in Chhattisgarh and other places. So really, I can't blame the Indian government entirely for doing this, because this is what the Western world is doing. This is what the United States is doing, using more and more fossil fuels. The United States has become now the top producer of fossil fuels in the world. And even if you look at, say, a country like Norway, which is incredibly rich, has one of the largest sovereign wealth funds in the world, and yet they're opening up more and more areas of the North Sea to exploration for fossil fuels. The world is literally set on a death march. There's really nothing else you can say.
Mr. Ghosh, it is frightening as we try and keep global temperatures to below 1.5 degrees centigrade in terms of a rise of temperatures, because anything beyond that, or as we approach 2 degrees, will be irreversible. The belief among people is that, look, just bring it down to well below 1.5 and things will instantly change. That's not the case, is it? Even if we, around the world, right, manage to control this, and there's no sign of that happening, it'll be several years before things potentially get back to normal. In other words, the changes that we are seeing now all over the world, right, whether it's droughts in India or whether it's more intense storms in India, things, or the Himalayan melt of glacier, that will continue for a period of time.
That's right.
I'm rather hesitant to weigh in on this because the science on this seems to change, a lot. Recently, I've seen people say, very important scientists like Michael Mann and so on, they've taken the position that, in fact, a rapid reduction in global mean temperatures could lead to, quite a rapid fall in temperatures. So, I don't feel that I can weigh in on this, at least on the science part of it. But I can tell you what I'm seeing in the world at large, and I certainly see that there's no general reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. I mean, they keep rising. And 1.5 degrees, as far as I can see, is now really, it's in the rearview mirror.
Yeah.
We are not going to get there.
Yeah.
As to how much warming is locked in, that is actually where there is considerable disagreement among scientists. So I don't want to weigh in on that.
Sure.
Are you of the opinion that climate action will be on agenda when the two leaders meet?
I mean, they may say a word, they may say something about it, but in fact, President Trump has repeated, his positions have been very sort of strange over the years, because way back, I think it was in 2009, he actually signed a petition which appeared as a huge full-page advertisement in the New York Times, calling on the U.S. government to act on climate change. I mean, he's a real estate guy, and his properties are very vulnerable to climate change, and he understands that, just getting the insurance for those properties is becoming more and more difficult for him, I imagine. So he knows climate change is happening. So when he later changed his position to arguing that climate change is a hoax, and now we see this is the position broadly adopted by the Republican Party. Do I think that they're going to talk about climate change? There are states in the U.S. where you're not allowed to mention climate change, such as Florida, which is actually one of the most vulnerable parts of this country. So what can I say? As climate change impacts accelerate, one of the weird things that's happening, and this is why I titled my book The Great Derangement, one of the weird things that's happening is that more and more people are moving into the most vulnerable areas.
Yeah.
Like Phoenix, Arizona, which is basically running out of water. Miami, where they're going to face, sea level rise already. There's flooding there on sunny days, So this is one of the bizarre things that we see about the United States. I don't think the United States is any kind of leader when it comes to climate issues, and to look in their direction for leadership on these matters is really to look in vain.
A final question to you. There's been a reform of multilateral banks to ensure that lending to countries that require climate tech is somewhat easier. But do you believe that that remains one of the central problems? That green technology is available to some, it's not available to others, and all these years later, we've still not figured out who pays for it?
Let me say, first of all, that as far as multilateral institutions are concerned, we are in a moment of absolute upheaval. Especially with the freezing of US aid and so on. We just don't know where the funding is going to go, and the way I see things progressing in the US, I think they're going to cut back on their multilateral funding, if anything. I mean, look, and you can't blame them. The US faces very, very major problems, domestically, internally. And the election of Donald Trump was based basically on that it's time to pay attention to the American population. And certainly as someone who lives here, I think that's absolutely the case. They're facing so many crises, So I think as far as multilateral funding for green policies, as far as that's concerned, I don't think we should wait for multilateral funding. I think, the situation we are in now is a devil take the hindmost. Every country has to look out for itself, and we have to try and develop in India our own green technologies.
Sure. All right, Mr. Ghosh, wonderful speaking to you. And, thank you very much for sounding that realistic note as we talk about, the visit of the Prime Minister. We are now joined by Ravi Agarwal, Editor-in-Chief of Foreign Policy. Ravi, thank you very much for being with us. I know, and, Maria, we both understand that illegal immigration is wrong. It has to go. And we have problems in this country, the fact that we've been unable to deal with it the way it needs to be done. But if India and the US are close strategic partners, we are friends, we built on this relationship, was it really necessary for video to emerge of Indians shackled,
Chained.
arms and legs, put into military transports, apparently with masks on their face, and then made to go through a 40-hour flight back home? And now you've got our Prime Minister visiting. So do you believe this is an issue that needs to come up? And do you believe that India might make a strong statement?
I mean, it might come up in terms of whether it was necessary or not. But look, from the United States' perspective, they've done this to a range of countries, allies and adversaries alike. If you look at the tariffs that President Trump threatened against Canada, against Mexico, their two biggest trading partners, then I think their treatment towards India on this one pales in comparison. So I'm sure the Indian government will bring it up. I think the optics were not great. But part of what Trump has been trying to do is not just remove undocumented workers from the United States, but to put up a big sign. The sign is, don't come here. And I think part of that is a message that he wants people, mostly in Latin America, but also in India. India is the biggest source of undocumented workers in the United States after Latin America. He wants people to know, don't try to come here. Now, you can make the case that from a human rights perspective, none of this was executed in the right way. I don't think the Trump administration cares about that.
Okay. And Ravi, you know, the view certainly is that President Trump's second term would be about revisiting many global frameworks, trade relationship, and also America's engagement in world conflicts. What do you think is likely to come up vis-a-vis India in this visit of the Prime Minister?
So I think the president, the new president, President Trump, he sees the world very much through an America first lens, where
Yes.
everything has to be explained and quantified through the lens of how does America benefit from this. We've seen that in slashing foreign aid. We've seen that in a very transactional, opportunistic approach towards, again, mostly allies, Canada, Mexico, Europe, and NATO countries. Now, where India fits into this is going to be an interesting thing to see because, you know, India is an ally, but it's not a treaty ally. It's not like NATO. It's not like South Korea or Japan. It's a friend. It's a friend that has hedged its bets. It's a friend that is currently hedging its bets because India is friends with Russia. India has improved its ties with China in recent months. And these are all things that the United States is deeply aware of. Is willing to deal with that because it needs India, both as a partner on trade, on tech, on defense, but also as a longer-term bulwark against China.
Sure.
I think one thing that is clear here is the old references of, you know, these being two democracies or any talk of alignment on values or human rights. I don't think that's going to apply with President Trump.
All right. Ravi, thank you so much for joining us. Let's bring in our next set of guests. Atul Mathur, Principal and CIO at Credence is joining us. We also have Peter Cardillo, Chief Market Economist at Spartan Capital Securities LLC is up with us as well on this special broadcast. You know, let's Peter with you. Let's talk about tariff. Is that a huge concern? Because I'm looking at the White House statement, which came soon after the telephonic conversation between Donald Trump and Prime Minister Modi, and the words that were used were, the president emphasized the importance of India increasing its procurement of American-made security equipment and moving towards a fair bilateral trading relationship. That emphasis on fair bilateral trading relationship does put America first, but it doesn't really put India first.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, basically here, what we're going to be looking at is high diplomacy from your leaders and, of course, from Modi and President Trump as well. There's no question whether or not Mr. Trump will impose tariffs on Indians or on India. And I think it's just a question of diplomatic skills at this point. And, you know, the basis for the Trump tariffs is to bring nations to the table so that they can negotiate what might be appealing to President Trump. And of course, it's a two-way street. But I think that that India will be able to reach some sort of accord with Trump, and that the likelihood of severe tariffs against India are probably less likely to occur than, let's say, our neighbors like Canada and Mexico. And the reason for that is because India is a very important trading partner in a sense of technology. And so I think this administration is certainly headed for bigger evolution in the technology space.
In fact, Atul Mathur, I wanted to speak to you a little bit about that. One of the areas where America and India see eye to eye is on semiconductors. We both are working towards resilient supply chains. American companies have invested in India. There is a concern on China, Taiwan's future, etc., etc. Do you believe semiconductors might bedrock a large part of the economic prosperity that both countries talk about?
Yeah, just yesterday, the administration basically said that...
Peter, just half a second. That was to Atul Mathur. Atul, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. I do believe that semiconductors is kind of the bedrock of a lot of technological advancements that happen. And with AI being where it is and fueling the innovation, I think in India, as well as in the U.S., as we go along and put our money in these these new technologies and chip manufacturing, this can become the basis for advancing the next generation of technology. So yes, I do believe that chip manufacturing, chip design is kind of the basis of the next generation of technologies.
All right. I just wanted to ask you, Peter Cadillo, in terms of your expectations as far as this particular visit is concerned, going beyond tariffs, do you actually see high-tech transfers being a core part of it? For example, India and the United States have ISET. There is a critical and emerging technologies that both sides are looking at. Apart from semiconductors, what are some of the other areas that you see tech collaboration between our countries?
I think the other areas might be oil, and India has been purchasing oil from Russia, and I think Mr. Trump is likely to try to reverse that. And of course, that doesn't mean that he's going to ask Modi not to buy Russian oil, but I think he might say, we want more, we want your country to import more from the United States. And I think that that's probably a good guess, and that is probably a negotiating point for India and the United States.
Atul, a final question to you. Do you believe that the make or break moment in these talks, and in fact going forward in the relationship, at least for the finite period of time, is tariffs? If India doesn't bring down tariffs to America's expectations, do you believe that the relationship may not actually advance the way many hope it might?
I don't see it that way. The number of opportunities on which India and US have collaborated in the recent past, you mentioned ISET. There are several areas within that periphery of ISET, aerospace and defense, health, in general, infrastructure, manufacturing, finance, pharma, IT, especially related to cybersecurity. There are just numerous areas of collaboration. And I'll tell you, I've been in the US for 25 years. This is unprecedented level of collaboration that we have seen. We do a lot of work with the US Embassy here based in Washington, D.C. metro area. And the kind of collaboration that we are seeing now in the recent past, in the last few years, is just unprecedented. Modi just spoke. Prime Minister Modi just spoke at this AI conference in Paris, and India is taking a leadership role in that space. And tariffs come and go, and it is strategic for each country to decide for themselves on where they want to go with respect to tariffs. But the collaboration between these two large democracies is to a point where it is a force that cannot be stopped. Especially around AI, generative AI, the number of startups that are happening in India. So it's just a matter of sitting down across the table and discussing what is right for US and what is right for India. But I have no doubt that the bureaucrats and the administration will come to mutually agreeable terms so that they can collaborate and move forward rather than regressing from there.
Peter, a word from you on United States withdrawing from all international organizations. In fact, President Trump has gone to the extent of saying that he will withdraw from WTO as well, accusing it of favoring other nations at the US's expense. Then who really? Then how will the negotiations or trade talks really happen with other countries?
Well, he has withdrawn, but I think eventually maybe he'll return to the table. And again, it's a question of, of America being fairly treated by other countries, and that's basically the fundamental reasons behind the tariffs, and in most cases even withdrawal from world organizations. And of course, it also depends on the foreign nations. Are they willing to acknowledge what Trump wants, or are they willing to say, no, we're just going to hold our position? Of course, it makes matters worse, especially when you're, when the green economy here in the States is practically going to disintegrate for the next couple of years.
I'd like to thank both of you very much for joining us. Very, very important visit just for the benefit of our viewers. Prime Minister Narendra Modi now on his way to the United States. He'll be in Washington, among the first leaders to meet President Trump during his second term as president, building on the strategic relationship, working through differences which may or may not emerge, but certainly looking at the future of an equation which has been of a strategic nature right now. But one which, and I think, Maria, we really must talk about this, is that it's bedrocked by people. Students, lakhs of students every year, families, the fact that visas don't come on time. If you apply for a visa now, you end up getting an appointment 3 years later. These are important issues that are likely to come up as well as both sides look to enhance this relationship. We'll take a short break, come back with a lot more.